stood William Hale in the range war that he waged.
You like women?
Oh, you know I like women. That's my weakness.
What kinds they got out there?
Just white. It's white that I saw.
You like red?
Red? I mean that kind of red?
Mm-hmm.
The book Killers of a Flower Moon tells the story of the Osage Reign of Terror, where possibly hundreds of Osage were murdered by white people for their head rights. In 2023, a film adaptation of this book was created and directed by Martin Scorsese. The film stays true to the real story quite well. However, it changes one very interesting and major detail: the main character. Grand's Killer of the Flower Moon, the main character is the investigator, Tom White.
My name's Tom White. I'm with the Bureau of Investigation. How you doing?
David Grand takes a research perspective in his take on the story. He tells about his own findings in uncovering the story that happened here. He dusts off documents that haven't been touched in years and explains what it was like to do so through Tom White's perspective. Scorsese chooses a different main character.
You need a drink?
Yeah.
He chooses to tell his story through the eyes of Ernest Burkhart, husband of Molly Burkhart, and one of the culprits behind this reign of terror. In my research, I have found that Scorsese made this choice for 3 different reasons. Reason number 1, he tends to enjoy making a darker character the main character of a story. He also told the story through Ernest's eyes because Ernest could see both sides to the story, both William Hale's and Molly Burkhart's. Lastly, he made Ernest Burkhart the main character of the story so that he could portray the love that he had for Molly Burkhart and therefore the tragedy that came with his betraying her. When Scorsese cast Ernest Burkhart as the main character of Killers of the Flower Moon, he was simply following a pattern that he often does in his films. He has a fascination with darker characters such as criminals and murderers, which is portrayed through some of his earlier films such as The Taxi Driver and Goodfellas. He enjoys taking these complex characters and portraying the inner war in the psyche of these characters. Scorsese says that his fascination for these darker characters likely came from his childhood. He grew up Catholic and poor. He lived in an area where there was lots of crime. So it seems to him that these characters are not only a part of his stories, but a part of his life. And he considers it his duty to explain to the best of his abilities who they really are.
In Scarface, you have an interesting situation where these characters, who are really despicable, are presented in such a way that you like them. And that was the key. You see, that's the first movie I saw that made me realize that, gee, it's the same dilemma I have, basically, because I grew up around a lot of these guys. I know that they came out of a tradition, though, of outlaws, in a way, which is something that's been very popular in American culture all the way back to the 19th century.
He takes on the challenge of doing so with Ernest Burkhart in this film. Scorsese portrays the evil in the character of Ernest Burkhart simply by the surroundings that he places himself in. Seemingly all of the places that Ernest goes to have dark lighting, a representation of the darkness that is inside of him. But Scorsese also portrays, again, the inner war within Ernest's mind. He does so both visually and conceptually in this scene when Ernest himself takes the poison he has been administering to Molly all this time. The lighting in this scene comes only from a fire that lights half of his face and leaves the other half almost entirely in the dark. He is Two-Face, caught between two sides of a war, though unfortunately doing much more for the dark side. When I first watched this film, I expected for Tom White, the FBI agent, to be the main character because I had already read the book. And as it turns out, Tom White was originally going to play the main character of this story, and Leonardo DiCaprio was going to play Tom White. But Tom White's position was not as beneficial to the story as Ernest Burkhart's. Scorsese says that after working with DiCaprio for a while on Tom White's role, he realized, I was writing a story all about the white guys. Tom White simply investigated the Osage murders after the fact. Ernest was on the inside, participating in the murders, while also living with an Osage wife. The way that Scorsese tells Ernest's story actually puts the audience closer to the Osage than they could have been if the story was being told through White's eyes. Molly's and Ernest's wedding scene, in particular, immerses the audience in the Osage culture by using traditional Osage dress, dance, etc. Even if the story had been told from Molly's perspective, it is doubtful that the scene could have been any richer than it already is. Telling the story from Ernest's perspective actually gives the audience a unique way to see both sides of the story. This frame is a perfect example of this dynamic. At the wedding, we find Ernest standing beside Molly, his new wife, while also standing beside William Hale, his uncle, and the most important perpetrator behind the Osage murders. The one who would encourage Ernest to give Molly the poison that was slowly killing her. There are scenes in the film where all the audience gets is a room full of pure evil, plotting or just conversation between conspirators, something Devery Jacobs complained of. But then there are scenes of only Ernest and his family, and suddenly the audience feels all the fear, the confusion, and the chaos that the Osage must have felt during the Reign of Terror. Ultimately, the film is not a pleasant watch. It is uncomfortable and dark. Ernest's position gave Scorsese the opportunity to portray that darkness fully, because the darkness was inside of him, whilst he was surrounded by light, with his Osage family and a wife who loved him. Ultimately, the story is long and uncomfortable, as it should be, because this story is a part of Oklahoma history, and a dark part at that. While Scorsese was preparing to make this movie, he knew that he wanted to tell it correctly, and that he wanted to respect the Osage lives and their story above all. So, Scorsese headed straight for Oklahoma, the location of the killings. There, he met with many of the family members of victims of the Osage Reign of Terror. He ate dinner with them and talked about this tragedy. He even met Molly Burkhart's granddaughter, and what she said to him was a pivotal statement for the direction of the story.
She pointed out, and this is what got me, she pointed out, you have to remember that Ernest and Molly were in love. Because we come in thinking, oh, these are the bad guys, they're doing things, and these people, they don't, and Ernest is a bad guy, and he's going to kill the whole family. They're in love. I said, what the hell is that?
As Scorsese was noticing, he was making a film all about the white guys. He and DiCaprio stopped to examine what was the heart of the story, as he says it. He believed that was Molly and Ernest's love. Most might disagree with Scorsese in this case, saying that the heart of this story is greed, power, or racism. But Scorsese apparently believed that this love would make his retelling of the story more powerful. To make Ernest the main character makes the audience invested in the relationship between Molly and Ernest. Scorsese makes it clear that Ernest loves Molly throughout many of the scenes, but yet he continues to work for William Hale and to poison Molly even while he is in love with her. Scorsese chose to focus on this love instead of diminishing the portrayal of greed and racism, as mentioned before, but perhaps makes it stronger. As Ernest's love for Molly is portrayed as so strong, the fact that he continues to do evil reminds the audience how much stronger this greed and racism was. That he was willing to kill his own wife, to kill his wife's sisters, to kill relatives and friends of his wife, all for money. Scorsese's focus on Ernest and the love that he had for Molly allows the audience to see the blackness at heart of all those involved in the Osage killing. Christopher Coate complained about the focus on Ernest's love for Molly, believing it was taken too far. Martin Scorsese, not being an Osage, I think he did a great job representing our people, but this history is being told from the perspective of Ernest Burkhart, and they kind of give him this conscience. It kind of depicts that there's love, but when somebody conspires to murder your entire family, that's not love. That's not love, that's just beyond abuse. And perhaps he is right, but it was Molly's granddaughter who had insisted that the two were in love. And if there truly was, it makes this story even more tragic, because it proves that man's greed can overpower love itself. And it leaves the audience with a question. Because that greed could overcome Ernest's love for Molly, the audience starts to wonder, how many people could this have happened to? A white man marrying an Osage for her head rights was common during the Reign of Terror. Molly Burkhart was simply the person that David Graham chose to focus on when writing his book. How many wives truly loved their husbands, and how many husbands truly loved their wives, but loved money more, and enough to act in the same way that Ernest Burkhart did? Martin Scorsese's choosing to portray Ernest Burkhart as the main character of Killers of the Flower Moon was ultimately a controversial choice. Scorsese could have chosen to make Molly the main character, to ensure the Osage were the center of the story. And if he had, he could have made the story a whodunit, a mystery, something a general audience would be interested in watching. But instead he chose to make the story an uncomfortable retelling, focusing on Ernest Burkhart. He cast Ernest Burkhart as the main character of the story, to give himself the opportunity to focus once again on a dark character, but also to bring the story closer to the Osage home, and to portray in depth how a person who loved his wife could do such terrible things to her and her family.